Welcome, listener. Bienvenido, oyente. This is episode 12. If you're new here, let me introduce you to Jaime Mallorquin.
And that lovely lady speaking just now is Yesenia Chavez, and together we have been serving as your hosts, your guides, your cuento curators for this Latino, Latina, Latine storytelling podcast. ¿Qué me cuentas?
¿Qué me cuentas tú?
So here we are once again, very, very excited to be bringing you a handful of cuentos in our last episode of the season. I can't believe it. This really has contributed to my own development as a writer. It's really given me a lot more confidence and inspired me from hearing all these beautiful stories people have shared with us.
Yeah, it's been quite a challenge. So I'm glad that we did it. But I'm also glad that it's done, at least for now. It's hard to believe that it's been 7-8 years since we had our live monthly storytelling night for a whole year in Boyle Heights. And the way that even got started was my mentor, Josefina, challenged me to take my paralyzing awkwardness and convert it into a strength by having this show where I hosted and shared awkward experiences and encouraged other people to do the same. And Yesenia was right there with me. So this is why we thought it was a perfect theme to end our first season on. Kind of a full circle type thing.
Yes, and I remember you shared this story that you're going to share with us now. So to get us started, let's just jump right in. Here's a story by Jaime Mallorquin titled A Good Human Being.
So early one Saturday morning many years ago, I woke up and I got ready to participate in delivering Christmas presents with the Adopt a Family program. So I hurried out of my room, not wanting to be late, and I ran into my dad, who was visiting us. He was in town from Nayarit, where he's lived since he retired. He had probably been up 2 hours already, and it was only 7 o'clock. He'd probably taken a walk, had breakfast, tended to his garden, and was now finishing up sweeping the leaves from our aguacate tree in the backyard. Back then, I still lived with my sister Patty and her family in the house that I grew up in. So, as I passed him, I quickly said, "Buenos días, papá." "Buenos días," he replied back. "Madrugaste hoy, verdad?" I just replied, "Sí," and I kept walking. But then I felt guilty for answering so quickly as if he was bothering me. I felt bad that right away I'd regressed to feeling judged by him for not always waking up as early as him on Saturdays, when really, he was just making conversation. So I thought, what if I invite him? After all, I was sure he would say no because he doesn't really like doing new things or meeting new people. But to my surprise, after I explained what I was on my way to do, he said, "Vamos pues." So off we went towards downtown to the cathedral, my dad and I, taking the 710 to the 5 to the 101. During the 15-minute drive, I told him that my friend Tavo, who we were going to meet there, had invited me, that the company he works for adopts a few families each year, and that while I can't afford to be buying strangers presents, I had joined them a few times to interview the low-income families in their apartments and take down their wish lists and other basic needs. I shared that seeing how these people lived had really been eye-opening, and that it felt good to help the less fortunate see. While I claim I don't care how my father sees me, maybe I did want him to think, hey, I think I raised a good human being. But instead, he laughed and said, "Cabrón, como si tú estuvieras tan rico. ¿Por qué no te ayudas a ti mismo primero?" That really stung, and I wanted to spiral and, take him home, drop him off, but I collected myself and laughed it off because after all, I did live in a converted garage bedroom and it had a bathroom, but still. Plus, we had just arrived at the cathedral and I was blocked on both sides by cars waiting to be loaded with presents in the long line of the underground parking lot. While we waited for things to get going, my friend Octavio called me and said he and his wife would be late. And so we made plans to meet up with them at the address of wherever I was delivering, and we would just share my delivery load. So the Adopt a Family folks filled up my car and gave us general instructions. The main one being double check the address and apartment number before knocking and delivering the presents. And with that, we were on our way. I texted Tao the address, and we met outside the large apartment building, somewhere near downtown. We said our hellos, and then the four of us unloaded the car. We double-checked the address and walked down the long hallway looking for the correct apartment number, and I knocked on the door. Nobody answered, so we checked the paperwork one more time and knocked a little harder. An old, groggy woman cracked open the door just a bit and asked, "¿A quién buscan?" I asked if this was the right address, and she said yes. I said we were delivering their Christmas presents. ¿Todo esto es para nosotros? We proudly said yes. She asked for a second to get more presentable and closed the door. We waited a couple minutes, and my dad remarked on how happy the woman had seemed. He was getting into it. The lady returned. She fully opened her tiny apartment to us. She shared it with another older woman, and we'd apparently woken them up because they both work the night shift somewhere. We quickly filled their place with 9 or 10 boxes and bags of wrapped presents. One woman said, "Ay, qué sorpresa, Dios mío," and the other one said, "Oiga, ¿y quién nos manda todo esto?" I said, "Es del Catedral de Nuestra Señora de los Ángeles." "¿Y por qué a nosotras?" Then my friend asked, "Didn't you get interviewed?" They both said no, and that's when we all realized, oh shit, this was maybe a mistake. My dad immediately walked out to wait in the hallway. Tavo called the cathedral, and they said they must have switched 2 numbers on the address when they wrote it on our paperwork. Oh, I felt horrible. We all did. I apologized profusely, and the ladies were very nice about it, said it was not our fault, but as we split the load of gifts between our cars, I could tell my dad was very upset. He didn't say much as we finally found the right family and made the delivery. All the fun had been taken out of it. As bad as I felt for those women, I felt as embarrassed that my dad had experienced that with me. I had told him the reason to do this was porque se siente bonito ayudar, but this had not felt bonito at all. As we started driving home, he said, "Ay, mijo, qué vergüenza. ¿Cómo me vas a poner en esa situación con esas pobres señoras?" I apologized and I kind of snapped and said it wasn't my fault, and then we rode in silence most of the way home. As we got to the house, he broke the silence and said, "Bueno, pues algo diferente, ¿verdad? Gracias por invitarme, mijo." Then he tapped me a couple times on the shoulder as he got out of the car. And with those simple words, I felt better. As much as I push against caring how my father sees me, I sometimes forget to see him as a human being, just like me, who makes mistakes and who's trying. And also, really quick, my friend Tavo shared the terrible mistake that happened with his coworkers, and they all chipped in, and the next week he returned to the scene of the crime and gave the 2 women 2 very generous gift cards for groceries and clothes. Because he's a better human being than me, something good came from this bad situation.
Oh my goodness, that's definitely an uncomfortable situation to be in, but I'm glad that you were able to pull something positive out of that. Our relationships with our parents can be so funny like that no matter how old we get. I know for me, I hope that my parents continue to be proud of me, to understand me and accept me as I am, but also they can in 1 second, in 1 instant, just transport you and trigger you, and then that's when you can make a choice, a different kind of choice about how you're going to interact with them. It doesn't always work, but sometimes.
I think it's getting better. I think I'm getting better at that. I just joke around with my dad a lot whenever I talk to him on the phone or see him. And it's been a while because of the pandemic. There's so many people I haven't seen. With everything suddenly opening up again, ready or not, it is time to see people and be around crowds. Our next guest, who we're super thrilled about, talks a bit about it in her story. Here is Cristina Igaravides with Holding My Pee and Releasing Me.
Like so many of us, these past couple of years have been full of sadness, what the fuckness, and fear. Mine manifested itself by way of a sweet, sweet generalized anxiety disorder. And among that sturdy tree of constant chaos branched a string of brand new fears not experienced up until this point in my life. Twigs of dissociation, detachment, health anxiety, that one made sense. And most notably of all, a little something called agoraphobia. Prior to 2020, aka 2019 BC, before Corona, I thrived in new environments. I was thrilled to be on stages, front and center of any room I entered. I loved meeting new people and experiencing everything this city of LA had to offer. I spent most days surrounded by people, but mostly lived alone 4 days a week, even though I was married, because my husband traveled every week for work, which made most married women I tell that to say, "That's amazing." What you should also know about me is that I have a small bladder. So confined spaces such as bathrooms were places I entered fairly frequently. But in 2021, I found myself clinging for dear life inside of an elevator, feeling my heart jump out of my chest inside the grocery store. But the most out of control I felt was saved for the tiniest room of all, which is the bathroom. Every time I ventured out to a restaurant, I had to audibly give myself a pep talk before pushing open the bathroom door. It would even happen in my own home. I found myself saying a tiny prayer to just allow me to get through this seemingly meaningless moment. And as a result, I started holding my pee. I would work on my laptop, go do errands, clean the kitchen. I never clean the kitchen. Anything to distract my attention from the stinging feeling coming from the thing I was holding captive downstairs, yelling out, "Release me!" My husband, who was now home every single day, even started noticing. "Oh, wow, you don't pee as much anymore." To which I'd reply, But on one summer Saturday last year, I was feeling particularly adventurous. My friend Angie invited me to an outdoor flea market at the Santa Monica airport hangar. It was a beautiful sunny day. There were food trucks and all kinds of fun purses and jewelry and cute retro clothes. On the outside, it seemed like a fun time. On the inside, my chest was tight, my legs were shaky, and I was in a constant wrestle with my mind, attempting to tame it like a rabid lion trying to jump into the fire. I'd say 80% of the anxious thoughts that bolt through my brain are fixated on trying to figure out why I'm feeling this way, which eventually leads me to anger, which leads to resentment, and finally settles on hopelessness. Why, on a beautiful day like this, with one of my closest friends, would I feel like I'm leaning over the edge of a 100-story building? But by this point, I knew better. Redirect, redirect, redirect. I learned that if I refocus my sight on an object right in front of me, I'm usually able to snap back into reality, at least for a few seconds. But I've also learned those seconds add up. Just not yet on this day. We're walking from booth to booth, trying on knockoff Prada glasses, pleather miniskirts, and wondering if we absolutely need this mid-century modern gin cocktail glass. And for a moment, I realize I'm feeling calm. And right after that, I realize that I'm realizing I'm feeling calm, and I snap back right into it. Don't linger in there. We know what happens when we linger. And around that lost thought, a stinging feeling does snap me back. Shit. I really have to pee. I've been holding it since we got here, and I'm running out of time. I can tell you, there are no amount of Kegels that can stop the pee from coming. Angie shows me the porta potties near the Pokemon purses laid out on the street. I shudder, but quickly come to terms that it has to be done. I put on my mask, march right up to the porta potty, lock the door, and tell myself, just don't think. Look at the toilet paper, the soap, the door handle, anything, but focusing on the fact that you're in a tiny suffocating room where you can freak out for no reason at any second. I'm peeing. Oh, and it's a lot. And I'm still laser focused on the toilet roll in front of me. Then I hear this weird sound. Like pee in a porta potty should not sound like this. It sounds like pee is dripping on the floor. It must be the toilet next to me. Have the acoustics always been this good in porta potties? Don't let your mind wander. Focus. I get up and realize something has gone terribly wrong. I was so fixated on taming my anxiety that I didn't even notice the toilet cover was down, which means I was not peeing into a toilet. I was peeing into a toilet cover. peeing onto the floor, peeing onto my pants. I was soaked. In pee. Oh my God. I can't believe you did this. And then I realized it's actually a funny distraction. And for a moment, I allow myself to laugh. This actually doesn't make me panic like I thought. For any normal person, they would be embarrassed. Maybe wouldn't come out until they called their friend. But for some weird reason, I walked out confidently and immediately giggled to Angie and told her what just happened. We then immediately decided to go on a hunt for the cheapest pants we could find to get me changed. It was sunny, but not sunny enough to soak up the pint of pee from my pants. And while we're on this hunt, I'm talking to strangers. I'm going into small dressing rooms. I'm making decisions on the spot. $8, plain black pants, sold. And all the while I'm doing this, my chest relaxes just a tiny bit. My legs grow a smidge stronger, and I realize I'm in the moment. And I realize this is exactly where I need to be.
Pues, wow, qué valiente. Kudos to her, because I would have wanted to stay in the porta potty and I would have cried and called my friend to come over and bring me my pants, and I would not have stepped foot out of there until I had new pants on. It just reminds me of her fearlessness and the way that she's able to tell her stories, her series that she created and developed with Teatro Luna, and her hosting.
I really missed that event. Christina was the host of Talking While Female. We went a handful of times and we really enjoyed it. She was a huge part of why we enjoyed it, because she's a kick-ass storyteller with a lot of experience, and she's actually a storytelling coach. Her Instagram handle for that is Storypathy, and we'll be posting all the information on how to get in touch with her. It's a skill anyone can benefit from getting better at, like for work, or if you're a writer, or just so you can submit a story for our podcast. Take her classes. But anyway, everything Christina is doing for Storypathy is very impressive.
Someone else we find very impressive is our next storyteller, Edwin, who's very busy these days working on some exciting projects we'll mention on the socials, but we're glad he took the time to share this very personal and awkward story. Here is Edwin Alexis Gomez with his story, The Boy with No Name.
The Boy with No Name was one of my best friends. We were inseparable. We would play N64 games all the time. I was always a little better at them, but sometimes I'd let him win. We did things middle school boys do. Talk about girls we liked, even though I was lying the whole time about liking girls. We'd laugh in that way brown boys that really get each other do. We'd get together to do homework almost every day. When the hot Baldwin Park summer beat down on our bodies, hangouts shifted to my house, where we'd swim in my pool, diving deep into the crystalline water, his skin glistening in the sun, and my shirt swaying in the pool, helping me hide my body behind excuses about not wanting to get sunburned. One morning at school, he told me he had something to show me later, but that I couldn't tell anyone. I remember imagining everything it could be. Maybe it was a new game, or something dead, or his body. The last one made me the most nervous. It would be awkward because I didn't know if I liked him like that, and I really, really loved our friendship. On the walk to his place, I pressed him. "What are you going to show me?" And he told me just to wait, that it was in his backpack. My thoughts racing as I continued to imagine what it could be. I started to feel relieved because his junk was definitely not in his backpack. When he arrived at his house, he smiled, unzipped his backpack, and pulled out a VHS porno tape he said was his uncle's. I was in shock. You had that at school with you today? He nodded. I shook my head in disapproval. There was an awkwardness that filled the room and a redness that kissed my cheeks as I blushed. Here we were, two best friends about to take things to another level. Like a blood pact, a strange, straight porno blood pact that would bind us forever. I don't remember what it was called, but I remember the shitty storyline. There was this blonde woman sitting in her living room reading a beauty magazine, as one does when waiting to get sexed up. There's a knock at the door. Then this beautiful black man talks about how he finished all the work in the yard. He has the strangest accent and jokes about being a black Irishman. And the woman says to him, I've never heard of a black Irishman. He smiles and in the same strange accent responds, You have now. And then they go at it, undressing, ravenous, their full-blown heat punctuated on screen by pixelated text flashing the word tracking over and over and over again. I hadn't seen naked adults in this way before, but I found my eyes transfixed on the nameless man in the porno, the way his body moved. Then it hits me that I'm watching this with my best friend. I look over at him and he has a decorative Virgin Mary pillow on his lap. And then I realize I should do the same. So I grab a Jesus pillow and place it over my lap. But I swap it with a plain pillow because it felt wrong and because #Catholicism. This helped us keep the parts of us that were swelling out of sight. I don't remember how long this went on, but on my walk home, I couldn't help but wonder whose naked body he was transfixed by. I never got to ask him whose body he was looking at. We lost touch shortly after that. He moved back with his parents. We'd make promises to hang out, but they'd turn out empty. Years passed. One summer when I was 19, he messaged me online and said we should catch up. He was back in town and he thought it would be great to hang out. I had friends over and we were swimming and drinking in the same pool the boy with no name and I would swim in years ago. Excited to catch up, I invited him over. The sun was slowly swallowed by the horizon. The newfound darkness made me flip the pool light on. It painted everything in the backyard turquoise, including our skin. Slowly, my friends said their goodbyes. There was still no sign of the boy who was now the man with no name. My last few friends left, and then it was just me. I dove into the pool, making my way to the shallow, resting on the edge, staring up at the sky, realizing the man with no name had made an empty promise again. Then my phone rang. His name popped up on the screen, and I answered. He had arrived. Saying hello after so many years was awkward for some reason. We weren't sure if we should hug, which we eventually did. He didn't bring clothes to swim in, so I let him borrow some. He put them on. I offered him a drink. We toasted, laughed, and exchanged niceties. I dove into the pool again. He more cautiously walked in from the shallow end. We met in the middle and kept talking about college and our families. He kept coming closer and looked at me in a way I had never seen him look at me. He was painted turquoise by the light, and now inches away from me, he asked me if he could kiss me. And I nodded. We kissed in the pool, and I realized that I now knew who he was transfixed by when we watched his uncle's porno all those years ago. I invited him back to my room. After we hooked up, we stared at the ceiling, the moments melting into themselves, and while I found myself wanting to hold him and be held, in the suspense he said, "You know I have a girlfriend, right?" My heart dropped. I had no idea, and it was something that would have changed the outcome of this summer night. Whatever love story the writer in me was concocting had died. I was saddened. I felt bad for his girlfriend, who might as well have been laying right between us now. I sat up, unsure if I was hurt or angry, and the first thing out of my mouth was, This was a mistake. We both sat up and I started putting on my clothes. He tried to explain how he didn't think this would happen as the first light of morning started to peek through the windows. I expressed the same as he put on his shirt and laced up his shoes. I walked him to the front door, and in the same way the bad storyline of the porno was etched into my mind, the last thing he ever told me is to. He turned back toward me, the awkwardness between us palpable, and said, "You're not going to tell anyone, right? You don't want to ruin my life." And I replied, "No, I will never talk about this again." He walked out of my life and transformed back into the boy with no name. The shame I felt as the sun came up that morning, the way his words stained my early 20s, is something that I myself have tried to bury. I have no idea if he married that girlfriend, and as far as I'm concerned, I kept my end of the bargain until now.
This story in particular felt like he just took a page from my journal. Well, if I'd kept one, because I didn't keep a journal, but although many of the key aspects of this story are different, so much of it was the same. It's stories like these that show me that we're not just making this podcast to give Latinx voices a platform. There's self-interest. I wanted a podcast to exist where I could hear a story like this, and also stories like our next one. Here is our final story of the season by Yesenia Chavez, titled Silencio.
A few years ago, I decided to go on a silent retreat. I know me, the girl that talks a lot, needed to quiet her mind and take a break. So I Googled it, and I found a place in Escondido, California called Deer Park Monastery. It was founded by Thich Nhat Hanh. May he rest in peace. And I booked a weekend there, and it was super affordable. It was $50 a night to share a room with 2 other women, and it included vegetarian food. And I would have a bunk bed. Camping was cheaper, but I wasn't trying to do all that. So I packed up my Honda Civic and I drove south on a Friday evening after another long week of teaching. It was a serene place full of trees and positive messages all around. It was peaceful and still. I checked in, I took my stuff to the cabin and proceeded to unpack my brand new Target sleeping bag and to freak out about why I was there all alone and how I was ever going to stay quiet. Then a couple of women came into the cabin that we would be sharing for the weekend, and we said our hellos. There was an orientation, and we were told to put our phones away and that we would be silent for the rest of the weekend, except on the last meal of the day. We had a delicious, quiet vegan dinner. There was a talk in a large meeting hall held by one of the monks, and we listened. And they played the bells, and I sat crisscross, and I started breathing in and out, hoping I could make it through, hoping I would not run out of there, scared about what I would find in the stillness. To my great surprise, I was able to listen to the sound of the bells. I fidgeted and I shifted just a little, but my know-it-all, goody-two-shoes, good student, overachiever vibes would not let me fail. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of bells. That was our morning meditation. I woke up feeling really rested and ready for what the day would bring. Freaking bells. Not a noisy alarm woke me up, and I did not wake up panicked. I had another delicious meal, and I saw a sign that has stayed with me. It said, "Life is happening all around in 3D if you just look." And it struck me right at my core. All the things that I had been missing out on because of my anxiety, and I wanted to burst into tears, but I didn't. I sat quietly eating my oatmeal with granola and fruit. I tasted the sweet berries and savory nuts. I tasted the honey. I enjoyed it so much. Afterward, we went on a hiking meditation, and again I had to be quiet. I could not make any silly jokes about the way we were walking or say just kidding after making a rude comment or anything. I had to walk and brush up against the plants and pretend like I was soaking it all in when really I was really feeling like I wanted to talk to someone. I wanted to laugh at myself. But of course, I stayed quiet. I didn't engage with anyone, and I walked along and listened as our guide asked us to breathe in and out and take in all of the colors, smells, nature all around us. Then we headed back to another silent meal, more meditating and more talks in a large hall, more sleep. The next day, I went to the gift shop and bought a t-shirt that says, "Peace begins with your smile," and a hat. My Raya hat, as the students say. I still have it. I keep it at school. I bought a rock heart too. Little treasures to remind me. The last day, we had a closing circle, and again, I wanted to burst into tears as I sang. Happiness is here and now. I have dropped my worries. Nothing to do, nowhere to go. There's no need for hurry. Happiness is here and now. I have dropped my worries. Something to do, somewhere to go. But there's no need for hurry. I sing this song often when I am overwhelmed. As I pulled out of the parking lot on that Sunday, I felt a new joy and peace in my heart. I recognized a stillness I could cultivate. As I drove away, I got a flat tire, and instead of a breakdown, a tearful paralysis, I managed to make it to a tire shop on a Sunday. I didn't just sit there crying. I got it fixed and drove up the 5 North back to LA to celebrate Easter with my family. I made it through a weekend of silence. Turns out, I could keep myself company. This was one of the hardest things for me to do, but I did it. And even though I'm still an asshole a lot of times, I know this place dwells within me if I just pause. Come on, sing with me. Happiness is here and now. I have dropped my worries. Something to do, somewhere to go. But there's no need for hurry.
What a lovely trip to take us on. Peaceful, silent, and awkward too. I feel like it would be tough for me. Your story made me wonder what I'm running away from. The idea of silence is terrifying. Gracias. I wanted to take this time to share some in-house news. After many years of writing poetry, our very own Yesenia Chavez has finally released a collection of poetry. Her book, titled "This Poem Might Save You, parentheses me." And let me tell you, as someone who's been a fan of this girl since I first saw her sharing her work between indie rock bands at a bar in City Terrace back in 2003, I believe, I'm so proud and happy for her. In case you've missed it, we'll be posting how you can support her by purchasing it, or you can get it on Barnes & Noble or Amazon.
Thanks for the shout out, Jaime. Writing and publishing this collection has really opened up my heart in a different way. Part of my development and my creativity flowing was because of this podcast. And so now I have this book. Oh, I'm getting emotional. Because I gave myself permission to be creative and to enjoy it. I really hope my book and this podcast inspires more Latinas, Latines, and more brown folks to write, or at least to know the value of their stories.
We hope that you are inspired to do some writing, to share your stories with your family, with your friends, and maybe even with us in a future season. Or just keep listening. That's okay too.
Thank you so much to our supporters, listeners, storytellers, and musicians who allowed us to include their music in our Virgin season.
Thank you to Alfredo Avila, like always, for his song that we've been using as our theme song throughout the season. And a big thank you for additional music to Sister Mantos, Omar Ramirez, Filthy Drones, and The Tracks.
Gracias por escuchar la primera temporada de ¿Qué me cuentas? We'll be back in a few months with brand new episodes y cuentos. Keep an eye out on our Instagram for a handful of possible future themes for you to submit stories to, or just pitch a story to us at quemecuentaspod.com in our Gmail, or you can hit up our DMs.
And as promised, here's a shout out thank you to Julieta M, Patty G, Joe Felix, and Chicho71 or XIXO71 for writing a review.
We love you and we'll miss you. Come back for season 2 and bring all your friends.
¿Qué me vas a decir? Si después del cuento ya no te encuentro aquí, cuéntame qué camino a seguir. ¿Qué me cuentas tú? ¿Qué me cuentas tú?
This has been ¿Qué me cuentas? Hasta la próxima temporada.